You have been lied to about your own nature. Society demands that you play the bleeding heart martyr, absorbing the chaos of everyone around you until there is nothing left of your own will. But the true empath, in the age of algorithmic control, is not a fragile victim. You are a highly calibrated human radar, fully capable of seeing through the matrix of collective manipulation. It is time to stop apologizing for a sensitivity that was meant to be your greatest weapon. Right now, you are caught in a relentless cycle of emotional drainage. If you refuse to build your inner citadel tonight, tomorrow will be an exact replica of today's nightmare. You will wake up, pick up your phone, and immediately hemorrhage your life force to endless notifications, passive-aggressive colleagues, and the synthetic panic of the masses. You will bleed out quietly in the digital noise, mistaking the world's engineered outrage for your own personal guilt. But there is a way out of this psychological slaughterhouse. Carl Jung provided a blueprint for the isolated mind, the rigorous process of individuation. Think of it as a psychological hazmat suit for the modern era. By confronting and integrating your shadow, you stop being a convenient sponge for the neuroses of others. We're going to transform your overwhelming emotional resonance from a paralyzing wound into an impenetrable, sovereign shield. The cold blue glow of a smartphone screen illuminates the dark walls of your bedroom. It is past midnight, and you are doom-scrolling again. Every swipe injects the tragedies of strangers directly into your nervous system, and you absorb their despair as if it were a record of your own personal failures. The sudden vibration of a late-night notification doesn't just interrupt the silence. It hits your chest like a physical strike, a jolt of cortisol freezing your breath. It is not your fault that the world feels so unbearably loud. As a Sigma empath, you do not simply observe the emotions of others from a safe, detached distance. You experience what Carl Jung called participation mystique, a subconscious, almost primitive merging with the psychological state of your immediate environment. The boundaries between where your mind ends and the collective hysteria begins are entirely porous. You are, quite literally, feeling the room breathe. In the year 2026, this lack of psychological boundaries makes you the ultimate prey. The modern attention economy does not just want your time, it operates as a sophisticated parasitic entity. It is specifically engineered to harvest the libido, your vital psychic energy, by targeting individuals with hyper-reactive mirror neurons. Every algorithm and news cycle is meticulously designed to exploit your inherent drive to care, draining you dry for profit. You look in the mirror and see a person who is constantly depleted, entirely convinced that this chronic exhaustion is a moral failing. You might even suspect you have a clinical disorder, searching for a medical label to explain the heavy, crushing fatigue in your bones. But let me assure you, your burnout is not a sickness. It is the exact appropriate physiological response of a highly attuned biological organism trapped in a landscape of engineered hysteria. You are essentially a tuning fork, vibrating violently to the frequency of a sick society. And because you are terrified of being perceived as cold or disconnected, you refuse to dampen the vibration. You carry the unspoken traumas of your friends, your family, and the endless stream of digital ghosts on your timeline. You have convinced yourself that bearing the weight of the world makes you a good person, when in reality, it is slowly erasing your existence altogether. This self-sacrifice must end before it consumes the last remnants of your sanity. The sensitivity that currently paralyzes you holds the exact blueprint for your liberation. but only if you are willing to face the darkest parts of your own psyche. We must ask the uncomfortable question that lies at the root of your modern suffering. Why does your deep, genuine capacity to feel make you the absolute perfect battery for a predatory digital economy? The answer to why you are such a perfect battery begins the moment you step out of your front door. You are standing in a crowded subway car during the morning commute. You have your premium noise-canceling headphones tightly over your ears. Yet you can still feel it. The palpable, suffocating tension of 50 strangers pressing against your skin. You physically shrink into yourself, crossing your arms, desperately trying to avoid absorbing their silent, collective despair. Like Ethan, who spends his days trapped in a cramped Seattle studio, absorbing the algorithmic panic of endless notifications, you carry this heavy atmospheric pressure everywhere. You try to disconnect, but the ambient anxiety of the city leaks straight into your nervous system. Your heart races not because you are in danger, but because the man sitting across from you is quietly furious, and your body involuntarily processes his unexpressed rage as your own. You've probably spent your entire adult life framing this overwhelming sensitivity as a unique virtue. You tell yourself that being deeply attuned to the suffering of others makes you spiritually superior or morally pure. But I want to ask you a question that might fracture the very foundation of your identity. What if your profound empathy was never a spiritual gift at all, but a hyper-vigilant trauma response forged in the fires of an unpredictable home? Let us examine the mechanics of your childhood. We develop the ability to read microscopic shifts in facial expressions, not out of some innate benevolence, but as a ruthless survival strategy. When you grow up navigating a chaotic, explosive, or emotionally unavailable family system, your brain must adapt. You became a human seismograph because predicting the sudden shifts in your parents' moods was the only way to stay safe and avoid the incoming emotional shrapnel. You learned to tiptoe around the unexploded ordnance in your living room, adjusting your own behavior to keep the peace. Decades later, your nervous system still cannot tell the difference between a volatile father and a passive-aggressive colleague in an open-plan office. The trigger is identical. Your empathy is actually a state of chronic defensive arousal, constantly scanning the environment to neutralize threats before they can reach you. Carl Jung warned us about the devastating danger of the persona, the social mask we wear to interact with the world. The tragedy occurs when the persona completely swallows the individual, leaving a hollow shell behind. For the empath, this mask almost always takes the form of the healer. It is a deeply seductive identity, but it demands an unending supply of self-sacrifice. You believe you must be useful, constantly fixing others, simply to justify your right to exist. This compulsion to save everyone is not kindness. It is a psychological trap. In Jungian terms, you are suffering from an inflation of the altruistic archetype. You have become possessed by the idea of the ultimate savior, losing your human limitations in the process. When you unconsciously merge with this towering, saintly archetype, your ego inflates, and you secretly begin to view the people around you as broken children who cannot survive without your intervention. This is the bitter truth of your chronic exhaustion. By constantly rushing in to absorb the pain and fix the problems of others, you unconsciously strip them of their own responsibility to grow. You are playing God, attempting to shield the world from its own necessary suffering, while you are quietly bleeding out on the floor. To stop this hemorrhage, we must strip away the healer mask and confront the repressed aggression you have hidden entirely from yourself. To strip away this mask of the universal savior, we must look at the brutal physical reality of your daily life. You are sitting in a sterile, fluorescent-lit, open-plan office. Evelyn, a capable manager, forces a tight smile across the conference table as her Machiavellian boss uses slick corporate jargon to subtly belittle her entire team. The insult is clear, but instead of speaking up, she rationalizes his behavior to keep the peace. But pay close attention to the bodily response. While her face performs absolute compliance, her body shrinks into a defensive knot. She is actively suppressing a volcanic rage that will inevitably manifest as a crushing, debilitating migraine by 5 o'clock. This brings us to an incredibly uncomfortable paradox about your own behavior. Why is your chronic, unwavering politeness actually a form of deep psychological cowardice? That migraine is not a random medical event. It is the physical manifestation of your own paralyzed will. To evolve into a true Sigma empath, you must turn inward and encounter what Carl Jung called the shadow, the repressed, aggressive, and entirely selfish aspects of your psyche. These are the sharp edges and feral instincts that your upbringing conditioned you to view as fundamentally unacceptable. You have convinced yourself that swallowing your anger makes you the bigger person, a modern saint among sinners. But let me be entirely clear. When you refuse to set a boundary, you are not being kind. You are engaging in a sophisticated form of passive-aggressive conflict avoidance. You smile at the people who disrespect you because you are simply too terrified to tolerate the friction of a genuine confrontation. Because this anger has nowhere to go, it ferments in the dark, mutating into a psychological poison known as ressentiment. This is the invisible venom of the weak. You secretly begin to despise the very colleagues and family members you claim to be helping. Every time you say yes when your soul screams no, you are actively participating in the quiet destruction of your own psychological sovereignty. Looking into this mirror is a deeply painful experience, but it is the critical first step toward reclaiming your life. If you recognize this hidden resentment within yourself, if you know the exact feeling of that unspoken anger, hit the like button right now. It helps us know we are digging in the right direction. And to make sure you find your way out of this labyrinth with us, subscribe to the channel. True psychological alchemy does not involve meditating your anger away or surrounding yourself with toxic positivity. It requires the deliberate, conscious integration of your own aggression. You must reclaim the capacity for ferocity that you locked away in childhood. Harmlessness is not a virtue. Goodness without the underlying capacity for destruction is just weakness masquerading as moral superiority. Consider this fundamental truth. A deadly sword kept firmly in its scabbard is a profound symbol of peace and supreme discipline. But a person who possesses no sword at all is not peaceful. They are simply a defenseless victim waiting to happen. To protect your profound empathy from a predatory world, you must finally grant yourself the terrifying permission to be dangerous. The moment you accept your shadow, the artificial power dynamics of your entire life begin to collapse. The corporate gaslighters and emotional vampires can sense this shift in your posture almost immediately. But to survive their inevitable counterattack, you need to understand their weapons. How do you observe a manipulative assault without letting their poison breach your newly forged armor? You are sitting alone at your kitchen island. The screen of your phone lights up with a long, rambling text message from a notoriously toxic relative. The words are heavy, dripping with the familiar venom of guilt-tripping and passive aggression. But this time, because you are no longer terrified of your own darkness, you do not flinch. You do not immediately start typing a frantic apology or a desperate defense. You just watch the glowing screen. In the past, a message like this would have ruined your entire weekend. It would have sent your nervous system into an immediate tailspin of anxiety and self-doubt. You would have absorbed their projected anger as if it were a valid assessment of your character. But the question that now defines your survival is this: how exactly do you observe this psychological attack, this blatant attempt at emotional extortion, without letting it breach your physical body? To build that impenetrable armor, you must understand the clinical mechanics of a manipulator. They do not operate from a place of strength. They operate from a profound deficit. They rely on a primitive defense mechanism known as projective identification. This occurs when a person forcefully ejects their own unprocessed shame, inadequacy, or terror, and actively manipulates you until you physically feel the exact emotion they refuse to carry. When that relative sends a message designed to make you feel like a terrible, ungrateful person, they are entirely outsourcing their own psychological garbage management to you. Because your mirror neurons are so hyper-reactive, your default setting is to catch the grenade they just threw. You take their shame, swallow it, and let it poison your evening. But once you see this invisible transaction for what it is, you can simply refuse the delivery. This brings us to the ultimate discipline of the Sigma Empath, the vital art of detached compassion. You have spent your life believing that empathy requires emotional bleeding. But true psychological maturity means you can look at the person sending that toxic text and understand exactly why they are broken. You can see their childhood wounds and their desperate need for control, without offering your own sanity as the glue to put their fractured ego back together. Detached compassion is the realization that you are not the savior of the unindividuated mass. You can stand at the edge of their psychological abyss, observe the darkness swirling inside them, and firmly decide not to jump in. Let them be angry. Let them be disappointed in you. Your new internal boundary dictates that their inability to process reality is a tragedy, but it is fundamentally not your tragedy to solve or absorb. This is why your earlier shadow work was so critical. When you stop desperately needing to be seen as the good guy, the classic narcissistic tactics of gaslighting and guilt-tripping lose their energetic charge completely. The manipulator throws their best hook, expecting you to desperately bite, to defend yourself, to explain. But you offer nothing but cold, terrifying silence. And in that silence, their entire reality distortion field collapses. You leave the phone on the kitchen counter and walk away. The notification is still there, but it feels completely sterile, like a biological sample viewed through thick laboratory glass. You no longer see an existential threat. You only see the desperate thrashing of an unindividuated mind. You have reclaimed your psychological territory. Now, you must learn what happens when you finally redirect this massive reservoir of energy toward building your own life. Leaving the phone on the kitchen counter was just the beginning. You step out of your apartment into the cool evening air. You are walking down a quiet city street, entirely disconnected from the digital grid. There are no notifications vibrating in your pocket, no crises demanding your immediate intervention. For the first time in months, the silence inside your own mind is not a terrifying void you need to fill, but an absolute, sovereign territory. As you walk, you realize you are finally feeling the actual physical boundaries of your own body, rather than the ambient anxiety of the entire city. Ethan, who spent his life absorbing the algorithmic panic of the collective, is finally breathing his own air. But this newfound peace brings us to a profound and dangerous psychological crossroad. What exactly happens the moment you finally stop caring about the emotional comfort of the people who drain you? The answer is terrifying to the uninitiated, but glorious to those who understand it. You enter the crucible of what Carl Jung defined as individuation. This is the ultimate, uncompromising goal of human development. It is not about finding a fleeting sense of happiness or practicing superficial self-care. Individuation is the painful, violent separation of your true, core self from the endless demands and neuroses of the collective mass. To achieve this separation in the modern world, you must confront the ultimate taboo. In the digital age, your true sovereignty is not measured by your wealth or your professional networking skills. It is measured exclusively by your capacity to tolerate being actively disliked. If you cannot bear the discomfort of being cast as the villain in someone else's distorted narrative, you will always remain a psychological slave to their expectations. You must look at the people you left behind in that apartment, the demanding colleagues, the manipulative relatives, the algorithmic outrage, and accept that they will project their anger onto you. They will call your new boundaries selfish. They will say, "You have grown cold." Let them. Your job is no longer to manage their disappointment. It is to stand firmly in your inner citadel and let their desperate projections shatter completely against your walls. This is where the true alchemy of the Sigma empath happens. By walking away from the constant role of the martyr, you are actively reclaiming your libido. In Jungian psychology, libido is not merely sexual drive. It is your vital, life-creating psychic energy. For years, you have hemorrhaged this precious energy, serving the collective sickness of the attention economy, fixing emotional problems that were never actually yours to solve. Now, that massive reservoir of power is finally yours to command. You must redirect this intense emotional resonance away from the digital chaos and channel it relentlessly toward building your own empirical reality. Whether it is mastering a craft, forging genuine connections, or simply claiming your right to exist in quiet peace, you are no longer a passive sponge for the world's trauma. You are finally acting as the architect of your own fate. As the evening walk comes to an end, you realize the fundamental shift that has occurred within your nervous system. You have stopped treating your profound sensitivity as a biological flaw to be medicated or suppressed. But this sudden reclamation of power makes you something entirely new in the eyes of society. You are no longer just an empath. You have become a formidable force that the current system was never actually designed to handle. The realization that you are a formidable force brings us back to the stark reality of the morning light. Look at Evelyn, standing motionless before the bathroom mirror. For years, she saw a tired, fractured vessel holding everyone else's unexpressed sorrow. But today, the reflection staring back is fundamentally different. Her posture is straight, and her eyes are incredibly sharp. The crippling anxiety is gone. She has finally become the calm, unshakable storm that others navigate by. Evelyn is merely a reflection of the exact psychological threshold you are crossing right now. You must ask yourself, why is the fully realized empath the most dangerous archetype to a system that desperately relies on mass compliance? Because a person who can feel everything, yet refuses to be manipulated by any of it, is entirely uncontrollable. You can no longer be guilt-tripped into submission, and your quiet presence now terrifies those who feed on emotional chaos. You've spent your entire life apologizing for your depth, treating your profound emotional resonance as a biological error that needed to be suppressed. But true psychological alchemy reveals a different reality. A person gains absolute power only when they finally realize that their sensitivity was never a flaw. It is an instrument of terrifying precision, a human radar that, once integrated with your shadow, must be wielded with a ruthless and highly disciplined will. Hear this clearly. You're not required to be the emotional landfill for a society that absolutely refuses to do the hard work of healing itself. You do not owe your sanity to your manipulative relatives, and you certainly do not owe your libido to the parasitic digital economy. Let them carry the crushing weight of their own unprocessed shame. Your only profound duty in this lifetime is the uncompromising, glorious realization of your own unyielding self. But do not mistake this new boundary for permanent exile. The ultimate victory of the individuation process is not isolation, but conscious, deliberate engagement. You do not need to run away and hide from the noise of the world anymore. You can now walk directly through the absolute fire of modern existence, navigating the corporate gaslighting, the doom-scrolling, the collective panic, but you no longer let those raging flames consume your inner core. You have survived the brutal empathy trap. Every migraine, every sleepless night, every moment of crushing exhaustion was simply the heavy price of an unintegrated gift. It was not your fault that you were born without psychological armor in a deeply neurotic world, but it is entirely your responsibility to forge that armor now. You have done the dark, terrifying work of looking into the abyss of your own aggression, and you have returned not as a monster, but as a sovereign individual. To solidify this psychological transmutation, you must anchor your new reality in the physical world. Do not let this realization simply fade away when the video ends. Go down into the comments right now and consciously declare your independence from the collective noise. Write the exact affirmation, "I reclaim my power. My boundaries are absolute." Let this public statement be the definitive, unbreakable vow that you are no longer a convenient battery for the neuroses of others. The paralyzing noise of the world will always try to break down your doors, but they can no longer reach you. Your overwhelming sensitivity is no longer a bleeding wound. It is an impenetrable psychological shield. You are awake, you are sovereign, and your inner citadel stands completely unbroken. Hold firmly to this radical power as you walk into the chaos. Guard your mind fiercely, and until next time, stay strong.